What's up, world, and welcome back to Unseen Work. It's another Wednesday where we unpack the unseen work. And Tyler, I told you I was going to kick you out, and I brought you in right away. So now you get to listen to me talk about you instead of hanging out in the fishbowl. So we'll make him be quiet until I'm done telling you who this guy is. But thank you all for watching. We are live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And if you see me look to camera 2 over here, we're also live on Instagram, trying something different, having some fun there. So wherever you're watching, thanks for being here. Let us know you're here. Drop a comment, your favorite emoji, a really bad joke about my haircut, whatever you want to do. Just have some fun in the comment section, and we will do our best to engage with you and answer those questions. So who's this guy over here next to me? This is Tyler Webb, and Tyler is a digital marketer. He also manages over 500,000 followers on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. He's a podcast host, and he hails from the great chilly state of Minnesota. And so, funny thing about this, Tyler, I'll now engage with you now. I acknowledge that you're here. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
But I was thinking about this before our conversation today, and we first talked, I think it was in 2018, wasn't it? It's like 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it was just like the cold DM thing on Instagram, I think, and hooked up. I think you were a sophomore in college at the time. And we just did a swapcast. You interviewed me for How They're Here. I interviewed you for Relish the Journey. Stayed in touch. That grew to like 7 or 8 other people I talked to in Minnesota. Me flying out to Minnesota, being on your podcast again. And now here we are. We just can't get enough of each other.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic symbiotic relationship, and one I think if you told me in a week before we first reached out to each other, I don't think I would have believed you that it would have come this far. But it's been fun to see you grow, Miles, and obviously since doing all the cool things you've been doing with Unseen Work, and here we are. I'm stoked.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we are in a very real way part of each other's unseen work, which is kind of cool. So let's dive in. I gave you that glowing intro, right? But I'd love to hear in your words, what do you think you're seen for? Before we talk about the unseen work that got you there, you meet somebody at the COVID safe party and you introduce yourself as I do this, right? What do you say?
Yeah. Well, I've actually had to answer that question a few times recently. I was at my girlfriend's cabin for the weekend, and I interfaced with a lot of new family members that I had never met before. And when you're explaining to a bunch of 40, 50-year-old Minnesotans what you do for a living, when you do what I do, you have to put it in the most simple terms. So it's given me a fair amount of practice. But yeah, I essentially, the simple answer is I'm a freelance digital marketer, and I deal with a handful of clients. I don't even know how many they are, just because in a bunch of different capacities, I'm working with a bunch of different people, brands, individuals, whatever it may be. So I don't even keep track, but I do everything from organic social media management. So that's posting on your Instagram feeds for you, content creation. So making the content that we post, Facebook ad management. So all of these sponsored posts that you see on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, you can blame people like me for. And like you said, I host a podcast, and I create a fair amount of content for myself, just because that's what fires me up. And that's what does my marketing for me when I talk about myself or think about myself as a business owner. So I'm I think of myself as a jack of all trades, master of none. And I'm fortunate to surround myself with really talented people that are really good at what they do. I try to play point guard on a lot of different projects that I'm fortunate enough to work on. But that's that's a very quick synopsis.
Sure. Yeah, I love that sports analogy there. I know you run a lot of sports accounts, so that's on brand. So you mentioned you're a business owner, right? Is that a weird identity thing for you to come to terms with as a young 20-something? You just graduated college, and now you've got that title. You own a business.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I don't even really see it as a business, or see myself as a business owner. Obviously, what I do is run a business, and that would de facto make me the business owner. But I see myself, and I think this has its benefits and has its drawbacks, as a freelancer, as a contractor, like I said, which allows me to be really nimble and really flexible in the projects that I work on. I don't have to employ anybody. I do work obviously with other contractors and other freelancers, but I'm not responsible for the income of somebody else, providing health benefits for somebody else, which is a nice weight that is not on my chest. Maybe down the line that will be put on me, but right now it's not. And it allows me just to be, like I said, really nimble and really flexible in the projects that I choose to work on. If I'm not feeling something, there's nobody else that I have to consult. I can just say, no, thank you. And I can kind of, drop that opportunity, or I can move on from it, or whatever it may be. And it allows me to take things up that really excite me and just me. And that's the only person I sort of have to answer to, which is really awesome. But of course, there are the drawbacks of when people look at you, and my girlfriend's parents look at me and they're like, well, what do you do? It's hard to describe. And I think it in the same regard doesn't grant me the same sort of legitimacy as somebody who, works a more traditional job. I'm sure we'll get into that conversation. Or even as somebody who has put a different name on what they do. My Instagram account that we're live streaming on is Tyler Webb LLC. I made the conscious decision when I registered my business with the state to just call it Tyler Webb LLC, because I knew that what I was going to be doing, all the skills that I was going to be providing, the client interfacing I was going to be doing was going to be running through me. And I was excited for that because of all the benefits I had just laid out. So the whole concept of business owner is something that I don't think I fully think of myself as, just because I really see myself as another piece that businesses or brands or individuals can plug into what they're already doing to elevate their marketing.
Sure. And you mentioned that, like the legitimacy thing. So how is that, right? Like you go to your girlfriend's cabin, or you go to mom and dad and say, hey guys, I'm graduating. This was awesome. This degree maybe they helped pay for in entrepreneurship, which I knew. So they probably couldn't have been too surprised.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm not going to go get a job. I'm going to create my own job. Like, I'm just going to go for it. What's that reaction like? Are they excited? Are they like tentatively supportive because they're your parents and they love you?
Right.
What was that whole process like telling them? But then also, I'd love to hear your decision process. Like, that's unseen work. What's between your brain as you're looking at jobs and deciding to create one instead of get one?
Yeah. Well, I think my dad's actually on the Instagram live stream right now, so I'm sure he'll be happy to
listen
to the answer.
Webb.
Yeah, Jonathan Webb. He is hopping in. Maybe he left.
Shout out Jonathan Webb.
Yeah, but for me, it wasn't. Fortunately, I'm really lucky to have a support system like my dad, my mom, and really the rest of my family. I think they really understood that my inclination was not necessarily to go out and get a job. Like I had maybe in summers past with different internships or stuff like that. I have been working and freelancing and contracting all throughout college, even all the way back in high school. I mean, my very first job other than at a grocery store was freelancing, doing social media management for $10 an hour for some guy in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so they always understood that I had these interests, I had these proclivities to sort of work for myself and create opportunities for myself. So I don't think it came as any surprise to them when I told them, hey, I'm not going to be pursuing a job at X company, that I think I'm going to try this freelancing thing out for myself. I also think it really helped that I'm a type A person, where I had to create a plan just for my own sake of mind to know, okay, these are the clients I'm going to be working with. This is how much they're going to be paying me. These are going to be my expenses, everything like that. I really had planned out. And again, that was for my own peace of mind, but I think it was really helpful to then show to them like, hey, I'm not just going to be winging it here. I do have some anticipation of how much money I'm going to be making, who I'm going to be working for. Obviously, I have my own place, and I was really supporting myself in a lot of ways already. So it wasn't like I was kind of just hanging out in their basement. The old trope of like sucking off the teat for a little too long, a little longer than I should have. So in that sense, I already had a lot of independence. But yeah, I don't think it's an easy thing to tell somebody. Obviously, it can be difficult to explain. But for me, I think it was really hard to stomach kind of going into that decision myself. Up until last summer, I think if you would have told me that I was going to be freelancing full time like I am right now, I don't think I would have. I maybe would have believed you, but I don't think I would have said like, yeah, 100% I'm going to be doing that. Up until 6 months ago, I was sort of on the fence about what I was going to be doing. COVID sort of accelerated the process of, okay, some internship got canceled last summer. That was a company I could have really seen myself working for full time. That took away that opportunity. And then all of a sudden was, okay, you can either kind of sit around and complain about an opportunity you don't have, or you could go out and replace that opportunity with a bunch of other work. And that's last summer what I did. And after doing that last summer and realizing, hey, I like this ability to do 20 hours here, 15 hours here, 5 hours here, and be able to pick and choose my projects. this is something that I could actually see myself doing full time, day in and day out. And that's what catalyzed that whole thought process of, okay, I can actually do that, and then launch into that. What does that look like? Creating a plan, reaching out to potential clients, people that I was fortunate enough to already be working with, and then people who had sort of reached out and I had gotten to know throughout the course of college that maybe wanted to work with me, but I didn't have the capacity to do so while I was in school, and just being like, hey, is me working with you for 15 hours? Like, it was like literally I was on text conversations, phone calls with people, just trying to sling like, would you be willing to pay me for 15 hours of work a week, 10 hours of work a week, 5 hours of work a week? And as I got a lot of yeses, I was able to kind of put those pieces together into a puzzle. And January 1st or January 4th, which was the first Monday of this year, I was officially freelancing full time, which was admittedly really, really scary and kind of nerve wracking. But in that preparation, in that unseen work, I suppose you'd call it, I think I was able to settle myself a little bit and settle the people around me and let them know and let myself know, hey, this is going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought the name in. I wanted to go there, right? So you teased it a little bit of how you made the pieces of that puzzle fit together. And that's the unseen work, where now you're just like, hey, what's up, world? I'm Tyler Webb, LLC. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But there was a lot that went into making that happen. So I'd love to unpack that more, like the timeline, any slip ups where you thought you had something, you didn't have something, and some big learns that came out of it.
Yeah.
So why you think about that? I'm going to camera 2 and acknowledge Instagram. There was a funny comment here I want to say. For everyone on Instagram, if you're still with us, you witnessed some technological experimenting, I'll say, before we went totally live. And Frank on here, who I know Frank from a company I used to work for previously, he says, I can't even get my internet service at my house. So y'all are the Jetsons to my Flintstones right now. So thanks, Frank. Thanks for making us feel good. And everybody else that's watching, thanks for waving, saying hi. And a reminder to everybody, drop us your comments, your questions for Tyler. We'd love to see them and bring him in. So, all right, you've had time to think now. Give us the goods.
Yeah.
What didn't we see before you're just out there crushing it on LinkedIn with all the content I see?
Yeah. So the abbreviated timeline, like I had sort of mentioned last summer, was going to be working full time for a startup up here in the Twin Cities. Dealt with sports, was going to be doing a lot of social media work, small company. So I was just really fired up about a lot of opportunities that was going to provide me. I had sort of come from a really big Fortune 500 company, Thomson Reuters News. Not sure if you're familiar, you probably heard of the Reuters News part of it.
Absolutely.
But one of these big Fortune 500 legacy companies, able to pivot like a cargo ship. So everything that you do just kind of takes forever. And I wasn't super passionate about the work I was doing there, admittedly. And so I knew that type of job wasn't going to be for me. And I sort of had the luxury of one more summer of an internship to figure out what was going to be for me. And that was at a company up here in Minneapolis called Prep Network. But unfortunately, once Corona hit, a lot of their business is in events, and all of those got shut down, obviously. Yeah. And so I was kind of left to not have the same amount of work, the full-time level of work that I thought I was going to do. And I was still able to work with them in a part-time capacity, but I'm like, hey, I got to pay bills. I got to not be bored over the summer. And that's when I went to Andrew and Sarah, who is of the Back Pocket podcast. I know you had Declan on the show recently. Andrew's became a really good friend of mine from me working with him and Declan on the Back Pocket. I knew that his day job was running Facebook ads at a really small agency. It was just him and one other guy here in Minneapolis. And I was like, hey, I know nothing about Facebook ads, but would you be willing to give me a job? Like I was willing to scrub the floors. Not that that's what they were looking for, but I was willing to learn and willing to grow and willing to do it for not a lot of money. And they were fortunate enough to bring me on and take me under their wing, Caleb and Andrew over at SocialWorks, and really show me the ropes. And I learned so much over that summer, like probably way more than I would have at Prep Network, not in a better or worse way, but just in like totally learning a new skill set that I didn't think I had in me. And so this Facebook ad component has now become a pretty large part of the business I do now, which I'm really fortunate for. And as I worked that summer and realized I liked the kind of work that I was doing, and I liked the flexibility and the nimbleness and being able to be that one-man show, I realized like, oh shoot, I could probably actually do this full time. And I was looking at the numbers. I'm like, I'm getting paid this much. And if I started charging this much more and all this sort of stuff and piece all these opportunities together, I could be making the same, if not more than what I would at an entry level marketing job somewhere. So I got into Google spreadsheets and just started crunching the numbers. And I ran through a whole bunch of scenarios of, working a different amount of hours and getting a different amount of clients. And I had a pretty holistic view of worst and best case scenarios. And then, like I said, I just started hopping on the phone and literally cashing in every check I had in terms of favors from people or relationships that I knew. Yeah. And I was just like, hey, would this be something you're interested in? And I got a lot of really great responses. And I think that kind of goes to the point of making good relationships over the course of your life. And I think that's something I've really learned in the past year that can be really important, especially in this business environment. And that brought me to January 4th, which was, like I said, the first day that I was full time. But that was of course, not without its foibles. I very distinctly remember, because it did not happen so long, on New Year's Eve of 2020. I was going to celebrate New Year's Eve with a small group of friends and family that night. I was setting up decorations for a party at my house, and I get a phone call from not a small client in my catalog in terms of income and hours worked. Sure. And I get a phone call from the HR guy, and they're like, hey, we're terminating the contract. And I mean, it's New Year's Eve. And I'm like, you couldn't have picked a better time to do this, right? And so I was like really caught off guard. And they weren't my favorite client, but again, they were paying me well, and it was income that I was counting on. And literally it felt like the rug was pulled under me not 5 days before I was supposed to start working full time, as a full-time freelancer. And so, we can get into what that taught me, but that was just one of those things where it was like, as much as you can plan and as much as you can be in spreadsheets and be a type A person and think you have the best and worst case scenarios planned out, there's still going to be stuff like that just pops up and in things that you just can't control. And obviously I was fortunate enough to fill that lost opportunity in with a couple more that probably ended up being for the better, just in terms of things I'm interested in and the people I got to work with. But it was, I thought, I hoped that it wouldn't be the writing on the wall for how this next year was going to go. Unfortunately, it hasn't been, but it was just a great reminder that, hey, I know you've planned for this, but you really haven't.
Right. Well, in a way, it was writing on the wall, right? It's not that they left you, but that you had a setback and you figure out a way to get through it, right? And so that's what was the predictor of this year, right?
Right.
So I see your eye being drawn to the phone too, like mine. Screen two, as I'm affectionately calling all you people out on Instagram. So we got Terrell Nixon. I know Terrell from college. He brings a lot of energy to everything he does, as you can see in this comment. He says, Miles and Tyler can't stay because I'm driving, but love you guys in the podcast as usual. An incredible amount of exclamation points. Let's go, in all caps. So Terrell, thank you, buddy. Thanks for being here. I love some like my random friends, like the people you don't talk to forever and they just show up like hype guys. I love that. That's awesome. So you mentioned that sort of failure, right? And how you had the spreadsheet and the plan gets blown up, right? And so I'm curious then how else you manage yourself, right? So you don't have a boss, right? I had this queued up. One thing I wanted to touch on you don't have someone that you have to report to and say, okay, what do I do next? Or, hey, Tyler, you're slacking off, spending too much time playing video games in the middle of the workday. That's all you. You've got to make it all happen. You have to show up and put the work in. You are your own boss and your own best employee. So besides Google Sheets, maybe you do it all in the Google machine. How do you manage your time? How do you get it all done? How do you make the sale and then follow up on the work? What's some of the things that people don't see behind the scenes that makes everything run smoothly for you?
Yeah. I'd like to clear up that first point, because it's something that's come up a lot and something that I think I was even misconstrued about, which is the idea that I don't have a boss. Anybody that works in client relations or anybody that has clients very well knows that even if they don't work at a company where you don't have a boss or you're all your own boss, you still have a boss with these clients that are cutting your check at the end of the day. And I think that's probably a better definition of what a boss is, not necessarily somebody telling you what to do, but the person that pays your checks. They're the boss. And so to that effect, I do have people that I answer to. But you're right. Day to day, I'm sitting here in my room, and this is where I work every single day, and I don't have somebody down the hall that I have to flip screens to when they walk by. It's it's something that I have to, again, manage my time and manage the tasks that I do. And that's a really fair question. And I think it's a really complicated answer with all the different systems and things that I use myself to keep myself organized. I have, with some companies we use Asana, some companies we use Notion, some companies we just use Gmail and we just are emailing back and forth. And I have my own master spreadsheet. It's an app called TickTick. I would recommend anybody get it that has to organize a lot of things. I like it because you can organize it like a Trello board or like a Cabana board, where you can have columns with different headings, and then there's checklists within those columns. And that's how I manage what I do. And I really hold myself to that list. Like, the most satisfying thing of my day is being able to check off a task, and I get a little ding when I do it. And so that's like the pragmatic way that I manage my time. And obviously I even have my Google Calendar pulled up right here, and I make sure to adhere to those appointments and those meetings, right, and make sure I'm scheduling in there accordingly. But really for me, it's been about time blocking. I love doing things in certain groups. I think that's been one of my favorite parts about working for myself and working with a handful of, or not a handful, but just like a myriad of different clients, which is I can decide which client work I do on which day. And I really try to put that all together in similar hours of the day, or just in similar days, similar times of the day. So that's been really good. I use a software called Airtable, which you might have seen me rant and rave about on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I love using that. For anybody out there that does social media management a lot, works with clients, needs approval or has approval processes, Airtable has been really great for that. It's basically Google Sheets or Excel on steroids. It allows you to take a lot of different information and represent it in a million different views. And there's a lot of great drag and drop ways to, have approval statuses be pending, have checkboxes, dates, like all these a million different things that you'd ever need in a software like that. Airtable has, and so that's been really great. But yeah, I just try to chunk as much work as I can, and I try to get as much as I can done. For me, I think it'd be really easy to, again, sitting in my room, work from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night, but it's been important for me to set up those boundaries and work normal hours of a day. I'll start working around 8:30, maybe some mornings it's earlier, some mornings it's later, and I'll stop working at 4:35, 5:30, whenever the work is done for the day. And I have to remind myself not to feel bad if I have to take an item on a to-do list and punt it down the other day, obviously with certain considerations in mind that some things have to get done. But, I just have to remind myself to set up those boundaries. And that's really been important for me in the work that I do alone. And then when clients want to reach out at 9:00 at night or at 6:00 in the morning, realizing that, I'm obviously here to serve your needs and to help you out the best I can. But at the same time, I have to be good at setting up my own boundaries, because I've run into issues in the past where I don't do that very well. And all of a sudden, the 15 hours a week that I'm working can very quickly turn into 25 hours a week. Oh, sure. And those extra 10 hours are always at the worst time of day, like the last time you want to be working. So that's a really quick synopsis. And I hope I prefaced it well by saying it is complicated, and it's still more complicated than that, but that's basically what it breaks down to.
Sure. Well, we got Jacob Oak here on LinkedIn. Do you know Jacob?
I do. I was on his podcast that he does with his brothers. And I would shout it out if I remember the name. It was like the JJ and N show or something like that. Nice. And Jacob makes some really good content surrounding fitness on his own Instagram, and his podcast is really fun. He says he talks to driven and motivated people. And so I was honored to be on the show, and we had some really good conversations. And I actually worked with Jacob. I believe that picture of him on LinkedIn is from when we worked together at Thomson Reuters. So nice. He was a former coworker of mine. And another fun way, like, we didn't interface a lot at Thomson Reuters, but we connected on LinkedIn and stay connected. And then when he reaches out and we have a conversation like we did, it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And he agrees with you. Airtable, greater than any other productivity tool.
I think I put him onto that. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Jacob, if you're still watching, give us the name of your podcast so we can properly shout you out here.
Sorry about that, Jacob.
We'll pull that in. Cool. So I guess what we've been talking about so far, I guess they haven't all been wins, but we haven't gotten into like the oh shit moments yet. Right. Mm-hmm. Which I'm sure it's been you've been in business for 4 months.
Yeah.
You have to have at least one of those, like, oh my God, what did I do moments? Did I do the right thing? I totally messed up. The client's pissed. I missed the deadline, right? what some might classify as failure. So I love talking to people about failure because I feel like you learn so much about failure. So when we think failure, I want to start with you with the flop, the fail, lie, obsess, pretend. This is like the ugly cry of fail, where you fail and you don't learn from it. You're hiding under the rug. You're denying that it even happened. It's like you just don't even want to acknowledge it. It's a true failure.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those?
Yeah, and I do. And unfortunately, I have a couple examples of the same theme, which means that I haven't done a good job of learning from my failures. But I suppose that's what this is for, to reflect on those.
There you go.
So that job client that I was talking about that dropped me on New Year's Eve of 2020, I would consider the work I did with them a failure. And then similarly, there was a group that I worked with probably a month and a half ago now, 2 months ago now, that I would equally consider a failure. And I don't think in either regard it was, and this might sound conceited, whatever. I don't think it was my fault entirely. I thought I represented the skills that I brought to the table really well. And I thought I executed on those really well. And oftentimes went above and beyond what I said I could do or would do really well. I think it was more a matter of me understanding the opportunities I should be saying yes to, and me understanding the opportunities I should be saying no to. I think when I decided to work for myself, I was in this mode for, probably from last October, November, let's say, is when I decided to go full time starting this year. I was in this mode of I have to say yes to every opportunity, because if I don't, I'm not going to be making enough money, or I'm not going to be busy enough. I'm just not going to have a successful business. And so I was in the mode of saying yes, yes, yes to everything, even things that I didn't think were great fits with what I wanted to do, or things that didn't really excite me. I figured, you know what, I gotta do this kind of work to start to really get into the things that I'm really passionate about, or the projects I'm really excited about. So I was in this mode of saying yes a lot. And I think that led me to taking on some opportunities that just weren't the best fit, whether it be what they're asking from me, the people I was working with. I sort of looked past a lot of those things in void of just saying yes to opportunities so that I could make more money or have more clients or something like that.
Right.
And so I think the fail lies in, I didn't learn that lesson, and I didn't hold myself to a set of standards on which opportunities I should be saying yes to and which I should be saying no to. And I think I've been getting better, but man, it still feels like pulling teeth whenever I have to say no to a client, because to me, that looks like lost income. That looks like lost opportunity to get to know somebody or to get better. And I've come to realize that's just the nature of what I do, that there are going to be things that are good fits for me and that line up. And there are going to be things, much like dating or much like friendship, that it's just the wrong place, wrong time. And it's just not a match. And that doesn't mean that it can't be a match in the future. It's not like I go tell people to shove it every time I don't work with them, but it is me reminding myself, and this comes back to the boundaries thing, like reminding myself that, hey, I'm the one responsible for setting up the boundaries, which means that on the positive side, I get to pick the things that are exciting to me. But on the negative side, there's nobody for me to really consult with to be like, hey, should I be doing this? Because oftentimes I am suspect to, like I said, my own naivete and just saying yes for the sake of saying yes, and not because I'm actually excited or I think the opportunity is a good fit.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I got a book recommendation for you. I just started reading it from the new job I started with. It's one of their like required reading list, but it'd probably help you decide what to say yes or no to. But it's called Traction by Gino Wickman, I think it is.
Okay. I think I've heard of that. I feel like I'm in a lot of meetings that use Attraction. Do they have like a meeting format basically where you talk about rocks?
They talk about rocks. Yeah. Rocks.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's a lot hole in there. He calls it the EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System.
Okay.
And so it's like how you define what you move forward in or say no to, and getting the right people in the right seats. Or for you, it could be like the right client in the right seats. And so you probably pick up a lot from that.
Yeah, I should. That's not the first time I've had it recommended to me, which probably means I should read it.
So the opposite of that, the flip, right? So think about the flop, face down, making the same thing over and over again. The flip, how excited and happy does somebody look after they do a backflip, right? They're just like, I did it. So what's been your flip, your fail, your learn, your improvise, and your pivot? You take the failure, you make it work for you instead of against you.
Yeah. So in this same regard of saying yes to too many things, I don't think like saying yes to everything and having it not be a good opportunity has been totally for naught. I'd like to think, at least, I'd like to think I'm learning a little bit. And there were some clients that were just carryovers from working in school or just working early on in the business that maybe just weren't good fits. And I was the one that recognized it. Maybe they weren't, it wasn't like I got fired sort of thing, but it was like, oh, this isn't a really good fit. And for me, a lot of those clients were what I've deemed like these small fish. I literally just had a conversation this past weekend with somebody who was a salesman at this, mid-sized B2B company, manufacturing company, not super glamorous or anything like that. And he, like, one of 16 salesmen, was like, hey, I know I got to be on LinkedIn. I know I have to be pushing my personal brand. Can you help me do that? And I was really candid with him. I'm like, look, I think for what I'm going to charge you, that you should just do it yourself. And he's like, no, like, what's it going to cost? He was really adamant. What's it going to cost? And I'm like, look, I have a minimum that I set, and I told him what the minimum was. And he was like, oh, that's like kind of expensive. I'm like, yeah, I know it's expensive, but again, the point of setting boundaries, I told him if I were to say yes to every B2B manufacturing sales guy that came across my desk who wanted me to help him run his LinkedIn, I'd have 50 clients for $100 a month, and none of it would be worth my time. And I was pretty honest with him, and he appreciated the candor. But that lesson to me of, some of these clients that you might have taken as personal favors, you might have taken because you were early on and that was what you could charge back then. You have to understand that, again, not all going to be right fits at the right time. And I've had to learn how to price my time a little bit more effectively as I start taking on more and more clients, and as I start realizing what's important to me. And that's not dropping clients as soon as the new best offer comes along, but that is realizing that, client relationships have terms, and that once those terms are fulfilled and you have the opportunity to re-up, sometimes you have to say no. And to my previous point, that's hard to do, but sometimes you have to do that for the sake of growing. And that might feel like you're taking a step back in the moment, but you're actually taking a step forward and opening yourself up to new opportunities. And I actually had a really interesting conversation a couple weeks ago where I was talking with a guy at a branding agency, and they didn't do any social media management. And he was sort of talking to me and hoping to toss me some business as it came across his desk with some of their clients, and great relationship. And I was happy to, take the meeting with him. And he was like, so what do you charge? And I told him that I told him what I charged normally, what my minimums were. And then I sort of said, I'm not really set in stone on those prices. And he goes, I think you get a lot more for that. And I'm like, yeah, I might be able to. I just feel like I don't have a lot of time on my hands right now. He's like, well, it sounds like you need to raise your prices. And I sort of told him what my gripe was with raising my prices, where, I'm in business for 4 months. I feel like I haven't gotten that much better. So I feel like I can't raise my prices that much more. And he reminded me that people are going to be hiring me as somebody who runs social media accounts, as somebody who runs ad accounts, not necessarily for the technical skills, because admittedly, posting on social media is something that 12-year-olds do, quite literally. It's not something that takes an immense amount of technical skill, but they're going to be hiring me for the strategy, for the direction, to help them know where they should be taking their brand online, because that's a much more daunting task for businesses, and especially for people who aren't like myself, or people in my generation termed digital natives. And so that was just another good reminder of like, hey, taking new clients, raising my prices, reframing what my value proposition is to clients is going to be really important going forward. Because if I ever want to grow this business, I can't just keep taking on more social media accounts. I'm only one person that can run so many social media accounts. I'm going to have to start altering and reframing what my offerings are. And that's been a pretty big learning or evolution for me, even these past 4 months and starting.
Sure. Yeah. And also, I agree with that guy, but they're paying you for like what you had to figure out to be able to show up and do what they're paying you for, right? Like, now's the time where you get to get some money for the years that the unseen work that brought you to this point, right? That they can't invest that time to figure it out, but they can invest the money, and that's what they're paying you for. So that's a really good point. So on that line, I think it's a good example of how you sort of flipped the flop, right? Like you said, you say yes too much, but then when you did, you figured it out. So that's a cool example. Just waving at people on Instagram. Hello, Instagram, or camera 2. People watch me. We're so look at us. We're so professional, Tyler.
We got everything on.
Cameras is great.
I've got like 3 screens going on right now.
This is wild.
Yeah.
But when you think of things in the past, right? So I'm going to ask you a question, but then I'm going to answer it to give you time to think about it. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you to answer this non-digitally. So when you think about your past, you do a lot in digital, a lot of social. You've got a lot of experiences past digital marketing, social that inform your decisions you make today.
Right.
But what about something else, something completely unrelated to marketing that happened for you that now you're able to bring into marketing and it makes you better at what you do? So that's the question.
Okay.
My example, one of my first jobs was at a manufacturing company, that B2B, nothing sexy about the job, right? In the housing industry. And I was the intern. So it was like we weren't running to get coffee, but it was really go run and put tile samples together in the plant to send to builders. And so I spent all day sticking tiles on big boards that people were going to display in their, if you were going to build a house, you go into this beautiful showroom, you pull the tile sample board off and you look at what you have. And there are all different colors, all different sizes. And I was just having a ball, sticking this one here, this one there. Like every single one looked different. And I didn't see why that was a big deal. But then when they come to check on me and they're like, what the hell are you doing? Like every board should be the same so that when we get a phone call and they say, hey, there's something wrong with the tile. Like, well, which one? Oh, the one 3 up from the right. They'll know the color is, sage or whatever, right? The way I had done it, they'd have no idea what they were looking at because nothing was the same. And so it was a good lesson for me that, consistency is important in whatever you do. If it's consistency in, language, branding, the tile samples, your own habits, like that's something it's a funny story I kind of remind myself of consistency. It's also now someone that I find myself in a leadership position where I'm giving direction to people, was a good lesson looking back at how to properly set expectations to make sure that me from, 11 years ago isn't messing up my tile boards today,
Sure.
So that's just an odd random experience that just I think about and laugh about. And it's just a great lesson that I learned that I still use. So what about you?
Yeah, I some of my fondest memories when it comes to, you said I couldn't go on social media. So I gotta stay off social media.
Yeah, not marketing, right? Like I work in marketing and that was like building tile boards in a plant.
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll pivot a little bit then. I think for me, some of my fondest experiences do come from high school, and I hope not to be the guy that thinks he peaked in high school, and I genuinely do not think I did, but I do have some great memories, and I do think a lot of them are pretty formidable to making me the type of person I am today. But I remember being in some classes, and my interest was never really in politics or anything like that in high school, especially early on in high school. But I was always pretty interested in U.S. history and different things like that. So a lot of the AP history classes I took, I was pretty participatory in, and I'm a pretty outspoken guy. So I'm not afraid to raise my hand and say some things. And that caught the interest of some teachers who did this local Model UN thing. And that was never something I thought I'd ever be doing. Like these kids that go to Model UN are the types that want to run for political office someday or want to intern out in DC for a political campaign. And that was never something that was on my radar to do, to be quite honest with you. So when I was asked to be a part of this simulation for like the UN, I was like, sure, but I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know anything about foreign policy or what's going on in the world, really. And so I go to this event and all these people are dressed up, and, I don't know if you had ever had an experience with something like that, but what a subculture this Model UN group is, where all these kids seem to know each other and they all know exactly how things work. And they have what seems to be a really nuanced view for kids that are 15, 16, 17 years old of foreign affairs and how different countries shake out on different topics. And, the way it works is you go and you get a fake situation, but none of them are always like so fake. They always kind of relate to something that's happening. And you basically have to go about and create a resolution by the end of the day. And there aren't winners and losers, but obviously there are people that represent countries that make it out better than other people. And when I tell you that this is an ego-filled romp fest of people that are just trying to get a word in edgewise, like I'm telling you, like these are people that will spend their last dying breaths on trying to get a word in so that they can have the last word. And so I'm at this place where I don't feel like I should be, and I don't know what's going on, and I don't know any of these people, and I have what is probably my first feeling of imposter syndrome, where I'm like, I shouldn't be here, and I don't know why I'm here. But slowly throughout the day, as I start to learn what's going on and how things work, I realize that and I don't really like this term of fake it till you make it, because I think it implies some sort of like skeeziness where you're not being forthwith with what your skills are. But I think there is something to be said about having confidence in yourself and having that confidence be projected out to other people so that they receive that confidence and understand that you have confidence. And I truly do think that people resonate to confident people, and that there are more people out there that are looking for people to have confidence in than there are people that have confidence in themselves. So when I'm there and I feel like I don't belong, my first instinct was to put on a confident face and to start talking, even if, in the wise words of Michael Scott, you start a sentence and you don't know where it's going to end up. And you just kind of say things with your chest, and you, to the best of your ability. It's not like I was lying, but I think there is some form of bloviation that happens where you're not exactly confident in what you're talking about. But as you begin to learn and as you begin to surround yourself with people that do know what you're talking about, if you can be that person that projects confidence, that's going to get you a long way. And for me, starting a business at the beginning of this year, as you mentioned it, a 21-year-old, and not being really confident in calling myself a business owner, I think there was an aspect of bloviating some confidence and having a bit more confidence projected than what I really felt was within myself, and having that really take me a long way. And at least in these first 4 months, having had it brought me success, in people being drawn to me and people seeing me as somebody, an authority type, having answers for questions that they're looking for.
That's awesome. That's a great example. Because the confidence thing is huge at every stage. You mentioned imposter syndrome. Here I am. So I'm 31, right? I started a new job this week, and even I'm looking around like, I've done a lot of stuff in my career. I'm smart. I'm accomplished. Like, I know I belong there. But then you see these people that just like have their stuff dialed in. You're like, oh my gosh, like, what? Like, how did I trick them to let me into this place, right? Like, I think it's human, like natural as humans for us to feel that a little bit. It's like that first day in the cafeteria at high school, right? You try to find the place to sit, and you're like,
really is.
Where do I go? And then you figure it out. You find your groove, and you just sit down. You have that confidence. You sit down, and then you go with it. I love that. That's a great example. And what's funny is that made me think of something I hadn't thought about in forever. I hadn't done Model UN in high school, but we did like a model school board meeting where they pulled like, you're the superintendent and you're this. And I just remember there was a guy that really wanted to be the superintendent. Like one day, I think his life goal is to be the superintendent. And I didn't care at all. I get to be the superintendent. And the whole time, like I was just like really aloof, just like asking questions to their questions, because I don't know what I was talking about. I was just like, I'm just gonna like filibuster this thing, really. And I just did it. And I pissed off everybody. Like all the kids were so mad at like, but then the teacher was like, that's exactly how a school board meeting goes. This was perfect. And I was like, there you go. So yeah, you just gotta roll with it. And eventually you figure it out. So I don't think it's like fake it till you make it. I think it's just start. Like take action, and then the momentum builds. And then once you have the momentum, you can decide which direction to like finish where you're going. But if you sit and wait to know something to make it, you never make it. You've got to just dive in, like, and just roll with it.
And I think another good point there, and I don't know if you've ever heard of like Boy State. Like in Wisconsin, we had Badger Boy State, where, I mean, you want to talk about like a sausage fest of people trying to get a word in. It's like the 600 guys from across the state that all meet in one college campus for a weekend and basically make a model country or a model state even. And so it goes where you're sectioned off into groups of 20, and there's 900 people here. There's groups of 20 people, and you're tasked with forming a city, and you have to form your own laws, and you learn a lot about like the process of doing that. And you talk in the speak of, I second that, and let's table this motion, and like all that sort of stuff. And you have to elect your own mayor and your own council people, your alder people, and then you form with the other cities around you, and you create a county, and then the county, and then like at the end of the week, because you're there for a full week, a governor is elected. And that's basically, the goal for a lot of people there is to be a governor, but a lot of other people, you just learn about civic information, and you develop as a person, whatever. And so that's another instance where I kind of felt this imposter syndrome, because all these people are like the smartest two people from their school, and all these people have the same confidence that you have. But I think when I reflect on those experiences now, it's not so much, okay, sure, I didn't really know what was happening, or I didn't really know what I was talking about, whether it be at the UN or whether I don't know how to table a motion in a meeting or something like that. But something that I've learned consistently throughout college and even high school is that the skills that you already have, or the skills that you've learned through some of these self-made endeavors that I've done, especially, are valuable skills and are skills that can translate to what people consider to be more traditional avenues. And so I think when I was sitting in job interviews, and the top experience thing on my resume was a Twitter theme page that I ran in high school. I think for me, there was sort of that imposter syndrome, like, I really shouldn't be here. This isn't a real work experience. But it took me reminding myself that, okay, maybe you could fake it till you make it, but also remember that the skills that you learn there are valuable, and those are valid skills. And you do have an arsenal of things that you know how to do. And even if you didn't get those the same way other people did, they're still valuable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And they can apply to so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what to me, that's where I bring it back to this umbrella of unseen work. And I think that's what I love about it, is like when you can put a name to it, right? So that to me would fall under what I call the passive unseen work, right? All these things you're doing, your self-made skills, your schooling, they can seem like they're siloed efforts. But when you take a step back and you realize you can add them, multiply them, whatever you need to do together, and that's who you are and how you show up in every new situation. Like, it's like your armor you put on to go into the battle every day. And then it's exciting. It's like, what new stuff can I do? And like new stuff skills can I add? And how can I use that to elevate something that already exists? And then that really lends to the confidence, and you just become unstoppable.
Yeah. But it never feels like it's for what you think what those skills are going towards, what you think they're going towards.
Absolutely not.
You would have told me in high school that this Twitter theme page was going to lead me to like a traditional marketing internship, I would have called you crazy. And at the same time, if you would have told me this really stiff marketing internship would have led me to freelancing by myself, I would have said you were crazy. But when you look back on it and connect those dots, I heard this recently, that it was Bill Gates that said, or Jeff Bezos, one of those two, that you can only connect the dots when you look backwards. And I think that point of reflection is important, that you look to see what you've done and what you've accomplished and how it's gotten you to where you are. And then you start setting yourself up for more opportunities like that to continue to grow in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And here it is, the JJN show.
There you go.
All good. Thanks, Jacob. Got that cleared up. Remember, go check out that podcast after you're done listening to this one, of course. All right. So last theme I want to explore with you is this idea I have of point C, or as I affectionately call it, the oh shit moment that you have to navigate when you actually reach point B. So we all spend so much time, like you just said, looking forward, right? I want to go there. I want to get from here to there. And then all the effort is put into the unseen work that takes you from point A to point B. Then you get to point B and you look around and say, oh my gosh, I actually did it. I started the business. I launched the podcast. I got the job. For me, I'm dealing with this. It's a selfless question I include here with all my guests, because I'm literally in this right now. I did the book. I gave the TED Talk. I checked off some big bucket list things. And now I'm like, well, geez, what do I do now? Where do I put that energy now? I have no idea. So let's start a podcast and talk about it. That was my fake it till you make it, just start and get rolling. All right. But so for you, I'm curious, if you have one like this, do you have a point C where you're at a point B and you're like, okay, here I have to go? And then how you navigated that, oh my gosh, I'm here moment.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the point B would be starting freelancing full time. I don't think I would have ever thought I would have gotten there. And that was a big moment for me to say like, oh shit, I'm here. And I could totally resonate with that sentiment of, oh shit, because putting in the work of the 3 to 4 months to plan to get to a point where I knew I was going to have the income to sustain myself and to replace a full-time job, that took a lot of work, and that took a lot of my mind space. And I didn't project past January 4th. Like I didn't think past, how am I going to scale what I'm going to be doing? All my thinking went to, okay, how am I going to make enough money that first time a paycheck hits in January to show to people what I'm doing is valid. And once that happened, and then it happened again, and now I'm 4 months in, it's happened like a dozen times where I'm like, people keep paying me, and I'm able to pay my bills and like all this really positive stuff. Now it's only started to sink in that there does need to be a point C, and I do have to look up and think like, what's next? And for me, that has really been, how do I take what I'm doing now and scale it to become bigger? Because the model of my business right now is I work with a client, I post on their social media accounts or I run Facebook ads for them, and I'm only me. And I only have so much time in my day, and there's only so much work I really want to do. I could do more work, but I'd be working 12-hour days instead of 6 to 8 hour days. And I don't want to do that. And so for me, it's a consideration of how do I scale this thing that I'm doing? And the first natural way to go was to hire. And so I actually hired my first employee. It's actually my brother who's in college himself, and he's studying marketing. And I was like, hey, a lot of the work that I do, like scheduling stuff on social media, is pretty redundant. And once I've created the content and gotten approved by clients, like that scheduling thing is something that anybody could really take care of. And so I'm like, hey, brother, would you like to make a bit of money every single month to do that for me? And he was, and he's been great. And it's been nice to be able to pass on a simple task like that to somebody else. And that comes back to a conversation of, people paying you to do strategy. I think I'm gonna have to do more of that going forward, which is kind of passing down the tasks that are a little bit more replicable and start thinking on a higher level, and how I can benefit my clients and how I can, again, frame my services and stuff like that. But yeah, I think when I think about that point C, it's not only doing more of what I'm already doing, it's doing different things. So it's can I create passive income streams? Can I create different streams of income? A fun project I've been working on that I chronicled a little bit on LinkedIn was this YouTube page that I had started through some Instagram theme page I ran. And it's up to almost 9,000 subscribers right now. And it posts like YouTube compilation videos. And I've hired a video editor to make the videos. And so for all intents and purposes, it's a passive stream of income because the editor makes the videos and then gets it uploaded. And I get most of the AdSense that come through that channel, which is really, really cool. And so it's been kind of a fun way to experiment with different forms of passive income. And in the same way with some Instagram theme accounts that I run, like I have an account manager who posts the account on a daily basis, and I get a majority of the share of the ad revenue. So that, again, is some sort of passive income. So it's like, how can I now take the skills I have and start applying them to other areas where it's not just a trade of time for money, but it's a trade of, knowledge for money or some sort of, digital resource for money or something.
You're creating an asset. That's
something that's a little bit more scalable. Right. So that's been my point C and how I can do that, because there is a natural ceiling to what I'm doing, and I'm just going to have to get past that at some point.
So how do you do it? Right? Like, I know you're in the middle of doing it, but
yeah,
like, what you want to do. Like, you identified your point C. Mm-hmm. So what was your process? Like, you sat down, you hit point B. How did you arrive at everything you just rattled off? Like, how did you decide what point C was to that now you can put a plan in place to get there?
Yeah, I think it involves a lot of consistent learning. I think I would be or a lot of people might be totally content just sitting where I am, making the amount of money I'm making right now and doing the amount of work I'm doing right now. But for me, it's been having to constantly push myself and learn. And a lot of that work and a lot of the things that I just laid out were done without pay for a very long time, right? Like running a Instagram page or a YouTube channel. A lot of that stuff can be really unfulfilling for a while in terms of money because you're not getting paid for it. So it really comes down to like learning new skills, and making sure you're continually pushing yourself that way. Doing things that you might not see the return for right away, I think is really important. And you're going to have some failures in there, no doubt. I certainly have myself. And I really think the last part is just kind of getting to know more people and having them open up other avenues for you. I can really only be focusing my attention on so many things at once. But, I've been fortunate enough to meet people that when opportunities like that arise, cool opportunities to help scale what I'm doing, they will bring those to me and they will be like, hey, are you interested in this? A really good example I have, one of my most exciting clients, I would say, is the American Association of Independent Baseball. And they're a independent professional baseball league that has teams all across the country. And me and a small team do all of the digital media for the league, which is really cool to think that I'm running the social media strategy, the digital media strategy for a professional baseball league in my first 4 months of doing business. It's really, cool. Really cool. And, the guy that ran point on that project that introduced me to the whole opportunity was like, hey, why can't we take what we're doing here and at a really high level, like in strategy, apply this and go and consult or go and work with other professional leagues? And I think something like that is really, really exciting to me. So yeah, it's just a matter of keeping your head up for other opportunities and surrounding yourself with cool people that are into doing cool things that are looking for those same opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. It goes back to what you said earlier in the conversation about like networking and relationships and how you were calling in those favors, if you will, but then you don't have to call them in all the time. Like when you do good work and you put yourself out there, they come to you.
For sure.
Which is cool. Awesome. Well, everybody, I got the ticker going. Make sure you follow this guy. It's at Tyler Webb LLC on Instagram, and on LinkedIn, it's Tyler M. Webb. And I could say personally, I'm a follower of Tyler, consumer of his content, and you put out awesome stuff. I mean, you're not just doing it for other people, but then you're sharing these tips and tricks for other people who are looking to do it, which is super helpful. And I love the way you put it together. So if you guys are listening to this, watching this, and you're into that, you want to learn marketing, you like what he's saying, you're curious to do it for yourself, make sure you follow Tyler. He's got a lot of great resources out there.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for joining us, Tyler. Thanks everybody watching, joining us. Jacob on LinkedIn, all you awesome folks on Camera 2, aka Instagram over here, joining us for this experiment. First time we're trying that. Thanks. Be sure to join us next week on Unseen Work. Same time. It'll be Wednesday, April the 28th already, 8:45 p.m. Eastern. We have the Unseen Work of Ashley Mitchell. Ashley was in the book Unseen Work. She's known as Big Tough Girl. And her story is one I shared from Relish the Journey, where she had to make the difficult choice to give up her first son for adoption. And then since she does a lot of work with adoptive families, educating them, she has kids with, that she didn't give up for adoption, that, she parents, and then she also is in her adoptive son's life. It's really an incredible story. A lot of unseen work that took her to, especially emotional unseen work that it took her to get there. So it's going to be a great conversation. She's really a fun person to talk to. So much energy, so positive. When she has been through so much, she has like every reason not to be, right? But she still is the most positive person. So Ashley, if you're watching, we're excited to have you. I hope you guys come back and hear what she has to say. So Tyler, thanks, man. This was fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Miles. I had a blast.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.